Hi everyone, it's Tracy here. Today I'm going to be making a card using some embossing paste and embossing powder. So I'm starting with a piece of cardstock. This is the Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock and I left it the size that it is. And I'm placing the Simon Says Stamp medium dot stencil over that. And I'm just going to cover the entire thing with white embossing paste. Just making sure I get a smooth coverage and the stencil is completely covered. The color of the embossing paste isn't really going to matter, so if you do have other colors or anything, you could also use those, just because I am going to be covering this with embossing powder. So you won't really see the color of the embossing paste itself. So once I get that covered, I'm just going to scrape off all the excess and then place that back into the jar. And then I can go ahead and remove my stencil. And I also cleaned up my stencil and my tools just because I don't want that embossing paste to dry on there. And I'm going to go ahead and cover this with the Zing silver embossing powder. Now my embossing paste is still wet. I didn't let it dry for very long. I just cleaned up my tools and then I moved on to this step. So I'm just covering it with the embossing paste completely, making sure that all of those little areas are covered. And then I went ahead and heated that with my heat tool. One thing to note when you are heating this, it does bubble a little bit, especially if you leave your heat tool on it for too long. So you just want to make sure that that embossing powder is melted and then take off the heat, because otherwise it will keep bubbling. So I'm going to set that aside for now and work on my die cut. I have a piece of Coordination's 110-pound cardstock, and I have this Thanks die from Paper Smooches. So I want this to be colored yellow. And I'm going to take my Versamark ink and just cover that entire area, and then cover this with the mustard embossing powder from American Crafts. And then I'll also go ahead and heat that with my heat tool so that all of the embossing powder is completely melted. I just prefer kind of doing this with my sentiments. You could also just use regular yellow cardstock, but I just like how this is thicker and it has that shinier look to it. So then I place my die cut over my embossing powder area, and I'm going to run that right through my Cuttlebug. And you just want to make sure that your embossing powder is dry and not hot anymore when you do run that through, because otherwise it might stick to the inside of your die cut. So go ahead and remove that and then take out all of the little pieces that are in that word die cut. And then I also die cut a vellum circle. I used a Spellbinders die cut. And I also have a Lawn Fawn heart die cut. I just have a bowl of these set aside for when I want to use them on my cards. And I'm coloring that with the Copic R29 marker. And if you do get this alcohol ink or the Copic marker on your craft sheet, it doesn't wipe off like regular distress ink or anything would. So the way I get mine off is I use the blending solution from Tim Holtz. You could also just use regular alcohol, like the rubbing alcohol that you get in the from the health section, and it just takes the marker right off. So then I'm blending that again with the R29. I added a little bit of darker red in there. Now I can go ahead and assemble my card. So I'm going to put that heart behind my sentiment. So I'm just going to adhere that to the middle of my vellum circle. I'm using a little bit of the multi-medium in matte. I'll just push that down and then add a little bit more adhesive to the back of that die cut. And I just put little dots all along the back, and then I kind of went in with my finger and smoothed it all out so that there wouldn't be any excess squishing out from behind it. And then I'll stick that right onto my vellum piece. It's going to overlap that heart a little bit. Just making sure that I get the heart even on there so that it's not crooked. And then I have this black strip of cardstock that I'm going to add to my white A2 size card base. And then I will also adhere down my embossing paste piece. So I'm just adding lots of adhesive to the back of that just to make sure that all of it is stuck down, because it does get a little bit warped. It's not bad at all though. And then adhere that down onto my card base. And then to adhere my vellum piece, I'm going to pop that up a little bit. And I'm just adding 2 foam squares. These are from Best Creation. They're the large size. I'm just going to add 2 of those behind the heart so that you cannot see it through the vellum. And that was plenty for this to kind of pop up on my card. You could always add some more if you wanted, maybe behind the sentiment, or use the clear foam squares, the cool tack ones. Alright, and then I couldn't leave this card without some glitter, so I'm using the clear Wink of Stella brush pen and just adding that to my heart. And you could add this glitter to the heart before you adhered it down, but I didn't really think about that when I was doing it, so I'm just adding it to the areas that are showing. And then my last step, I'm using the We Are Memory Keepers corner chomper, and I'm using the 1/2 inch and rounding that upper left hand corner. And then that is my finished card for today. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial and will try using some embossing paste and embossing powders on your card. Make sure you guys subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye!